The glass facade of Stratacore Technologies headquarters gleamed under the Boston sun, towering above the skyline like a monument to my family's ambition. My brother Ethan's ambition, to be exact. At 35, he was the golden boy CEO of our family's tech empire, while I was, well, according to them, just tinkering away in my loft, on ideas nobody cared about. I tugged the zipper of my faded gray hoodie up to my chin. I chosen it deliberately instead of the designer suits my family preferred. As I strode past the marble security desk, the guard barely glanced up. Nobody paid attention to the CEO's eccentric sister, who hadn't figured out her life yet. My phone vibrated in my pocket, lighting up with yet another frantic text from Ethan. "Brooke, please, everything's failing." So now they needed me. Needed the sister whose startup they'd mocked for 4 years as nothing more than a cute hobby. After countless family dinners, where they'd talked over my attempts to explain quantum encryption, after my mother's constant refrain, "When are you going to get a real job like your brother?" Suddenly, I was essential. Because Stratacore's much-hyped security system was crashing and burning, and the company's stop was taking faster than anyone could salvage it. The elevator whisked me straight to the executive floor, opening into chaos. Engineers huddled in anxious clusters, screens filled with frantic lines of code. Executives barked into phones, and there in the center of the storm was Ethan, pacing like a caged tiger in his immaculately tailored navy suit, hair slightly out of place for the first time I could remember. "Brooke," he exclaimed the second he spotted me, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "Thank God you're here." "What's the problem?" I asked, folding my arms. "It's the quantum encryption protocol," he blurted. "It's collapsing. Nobody on our team can figure out why." I raised a brow. "You mean the same protocol you called, what was it, amateur hour nonsense, when I tried to show you vulnerabilities last year?" "Brooke, this isn't the time. Or was it when you told the board my startup was just dabbling in theoretical fantasies while Stratacore built real tech solutions?" His perfectly polished CEO mask slipped for a second, panic flashing across his face. "Brooke, please," he whispered, voice hoarse. "We're losing millions every hour. Our government contracts, banking systems, critical infrastructure, they all run on this protocol." I sighed, sliding my backpack off my shoulders and pulling out my laptop, boldly stickered with the logo of my company, Cypherwave Quantum Solutions. "Show me the system." The next hour disappeared in a whirlwind of code and calculations. Ethan hovered nearby, silent except for the occasional sharp intake of breath. Exactly as I'd warned them, their encryption protocol was riddled with fundamental flaws my team at Cypherwave had solved months ago, flaws Ethan and his board had dismissed as irrelevant. "Your quantum key distribution is misaligned," I said, tilting my screen toward him. "You're losing coherence at the quantum level. That's why the whole system is failing." He stared at me, stunned, as if seeing me for the first time. And for the first time, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Ethan leaned over my shoulder, the sharp scent of his expensive cologne mingling with something less familiar. Pure desperation. "Can you fix it?" he asked, voice tight. "I already did," I replied. His eyes widened as I pulled up a file on my screen. "Remember when I showed you Cypherwave's solution? Oh, about 6 months ago?" Recognition and embarrassment flickered across his face. Back then, I'd tried to convince Stratacore to partner with my so-called hobby startup. Ethan had practically laughed me out of the boardroom. "Brooke, the solution you're looking for?" I said, snapping my laptop shut. "It's patented. By my company." A hush fell over the executive floor. For the first time all morning, the frantic chatter ceased. Developers froze mid-keystroke. Executives lowered their phones. Ethan's face drained of color as reality crashed down around him. The sister they'd dismissed as flighty, the startup they'd mocked as a hobby. We now owned the only working fix for the disaster threatening to topple their billion-dollar tech empire. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mom. "Darling, are you helping your brother with his little computer problem? Family has to stick together." "A little computer problem, right," The same family who insisted my quantum encryption research was merely playing with codes. I texted back. Actually, I'm discussing a business proposition. My company may have a solution Stratacore needs. Across the room, Ethan was already dialing into an emergency board meeting, his hand trembling as he tapped the speakerphone. Whatever you want, he said quickly, meeting my eyes. Name your price. I rose from my chair, smoothing out the wrinkles in my hoodie and jeans, the same casual clothes they'd once ridiculed. Ooh, I will, I said. And Ethan, you might want to tell the board they're negotiating with a CEO now, not your hobby-coding little sister. Through the glass walls, the Boston skyline gleamed, sunlight glancing off the Charles River. This was the city where I'd quietly built Cypherwave, while they built assumptions about who I was. They thought I was just playing, but the truth was, I'd been planning. Had I planned, and now the empire they'd worshipped needed my hobby to survive. The following week, technology headlines told the story better than I ever could. Stratacore announces partnership with Cypherwave Quantum Solutions. Quantum encryption breakthrough saves tech giant. Boston's new power player. Brooke Carter's rise from hobby coder to industry savior. I sat in my new office, formerly Ethan's coveted corner suite, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view over Boston Harbor. The sunlight sparkled on the water as I scrolled through article after article, heralding Cypherwave as the future of tech security. The door swung open without a knock. Some habits, it seemed, die hard. Up. Mom swept in, her designer handbag swinging like a metronome, her perfume announcing her presence before she spoke. We need to discuss the situation, she said firmly. I didn't bother looking up from my tablet. The situation where my hobby saved your family's company? Or the situation where I now own 30% of Stratacore's revenue stream? This vindictiveness. Mom perched carefully on the edge of one of the leather chairs. It's not becoming. Your brother is devastated. Devastated, I repeated softly, savoring the word. For the first time in years, I felt no need to apologize for who I was. If you've ever been underestimated or dreamed of turning the tables, make sure you subscribe for the next chapter of how Brooke rewrites the rules of power, family, and revenge. I finally met her eyes. Or is he embarrassed, I asked, my voice cool, that his quirky sister just became his boss? Right on cue, Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking distinctly uncomfortable and business casual. Gone was his usual tailored suit. One of my new company culture rules: no suits unless we're meeting clients. The technical team needs your approval on the quantum protocol integration, he said, still avoiding my gaze. Put it in the queue, I replied, flipping back to my tablet, just like I had to every time I tried to show you my work over the last 4 years. Beside me, Mom's perfect composure cracked ever so slightly. Brooke, please, she said. We're family. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Funny you'd say that. I tapped my screen, pulling up an old email. That's not what you said when I asked for Stratacore's support last year. Let's see. Ah, here it is. The company cannot risk resources on uncertain ventures merely because of family connections. Ethan shifted from foot to foot, the tips of his dress shoes scuffing against the marble floor. That was different, he mumbled. We didn't understand. No, I cut him off, my voice sharp. You didn't try to understand. You were too busy basking in your golden boy CEO status to notice that your hobby-coding sister was quietly revolutionizing quantum encryption. My phone buzzed with a new message from our head of PR. Google wants to feature Cypherwave. From dismissed to dominant. The Cypherwave story. Perfect timing. I held up the message, my eyes glinting. Mom, you'll love this part. They want to interview the family that dismissed my work as a hobby. Mom blanched, color draining from the flawless makeup she'd applied that morning. You wouldn't, she whispered. Actually, I would, I said evenly, because this isn't just about family anymore. It's about setting the record straight. A voice crackled through my office intercom. Mr. Carter, the board is ready for your presentation on the new quantum security infrastructure. I stood, smoothing my deliberately casual black blazer over a Cypherwave t-shirt. Duty calls. I glanced at Ethan. Oh, and, Ethan? That technical team's approval request? Denied. Tell them to review the documentation I sent, what was it, 3 years ago? All the answers were there if anyone had bothered to read them. Ethan stared at me, speechless, as I strode toward the boardroom. Inside, the room looked dramatically different from the last time I'd been there, as nothing more than Ethan's overlooked sister. 3 Cypherwave executives now occupied seats once held by Stratacore's aging tech veterans. Even Dad still sat at the head of the table. But the air crackled with a new reality. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone knew it. I didn't look at any of the cards. Once they showed up, so too. I paused at the doorway and looked around. Let's discuss the future of quantum encryption. I stood at the head of the boardroom table, right where Ethan used to hold court, commanding the room's attention with every word. Now, all eyes were on me. And that, I said, pacing slowly, is why Stratacore's previous approach was fundamentally flawed. For the next hour, I laid out in painstaking detail exactly what they'd missed while brushing off my research as a distraction. Every patent they could have collaborated on, every technological breakthrough they'd dismissed, every opportunity that had slipped through their fingers because they couldn't look past their narrow preconceptions. When I finally stopped, I rested my palms on the table and swept my gaze over the stunned faces staring back at me. Questions? I concluded. There was a long silence, broken only by the soft hum of the projector cooling down. Dad finally cleared his throat, though his voice lacked the authority it once carried. Brooke, he said slowly, I think we all owe you an apology. I let out a quiet laugh. An apology? I echoed. Dad, you owe me 4 years of ignored innovations, millions in lost opportunities, and 1 very prime parking spot. The apology is just a bonus. My phone buzzed on the table. Another message from our PR director lit up my screen. Forbes wants to feature you on the cover. The hobby that saved a billion-dollar empire. I turned the screen toward the board members. See, I said. That's the beautiful thing about success. It rewrites everyone's memory of failure. Later that evening, as the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, I packed up my new office. Just as I was slipping my laptop into my bag, Ethan appeared in the doorway. The technical team revised their proposal, he said quietly, based on your documentation from 3 years ago. You were right, Brooke. All the answers were there. Of course they were, I said, shutting my laptop with a soft click. I tried to tell you that for years. But hey, at least my hobby was there when your empire needed saving. He flinched at my words. I was wrong, he admitted. We all were. Yes, I agreed simply. You were. I slung my bag over my shoulder and headed for the door, thinking of the new parking spot with my name freshly stenciled on the asphalt downstairs. But look on the bright side, I tossed over my shoulder. Now you work for your little sister's hobby. How's that for a plot twist? Outside, the Boston skyline shimmered under streaks of purple and gold as the sun dipped behind the Prudential Tower. I drove home through streets buzzing with summer energy, my phone vibrating steadily beside me with messages. Mom, darling, about that Forbes interview. Alice. The board wants to discuss expanding your role. Ethan, can we talk about the technical team's new proposal? I ignored them all, focusing instead on the email blinking at the top of my inbox. A personal note from Google's CEO about a potential collaboration in quantum security. Let my family sit with the consequences of years of dismissal. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving people wrong, it's making them work for the person they underestimated. After all, sometimes a hobby isn't just a hobby. Sometimes it's an empire in disguise, waiting for the perfect moment to step into the light. And as for Stratacore, they learned the hard way that the next big thing in tech might just come from the person they least expected, the one they dismissed as merely playing with computers while they believed the real business was getting done. Now they all worked for my so-called hobby. And that was worth every awkward family dinner where I'd been talked over, every ignored presentation, every condescending pat on the shoulder as if I were a child fumbling with toys instead of algorithms. Because in the end, code doesn't care who wrote it. It only cares if it works, and mine worked flawlessly. 3 months later, I stood on stage at the World Technology Summit in Boston, delivering the keynote speech that, not so long ago, was supposed to be Ethan's. The audience, a sea of venture capitalists, tech CEOs, and engineers from around the globe, leaned forward in their seats, hanging on every word as I explained how Cypherwave's hobby code had transformed the cybersecurity landscape. In the front row, my family sat in rapt silence. Mom had finally stopped trying to drag me into the world of stiff corporate suits, accepting my preferred style of tailored Cypherwave t-shirts layered under casual blazers. Dad no longer introduced me as Ethan's sister. Instead, he proudly called me the founder of Cypherwave Quantum Solutions and the woman who saved Stratacore. And Ethan, well, he'd learned to knock before stepping into my office. Progress. The future of technology, I said, my voice steady, isn't about titles, tradition, or who sits at the head of the table. It's about innovation, no matter where it comes from. Because sometimes the biggest breakthroughs begin as the very projects everyone else dismisses as hobbies. I paused, scanning the room, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel overlooked or underestimated. I felt seen. The moment I finished, the hall erupted into a standing ovation. Applause thundered off the high ceilings of the convention center. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled furiously. Yet the applause wasn't the best part. Midway through the ovation, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I slipped it out and glanced at the screen. An email had just come in from the CEO of Google. We're prepared to offer $2 billion, 0 cents, for exclusive rights to Cypherwave's next-generation quantum encryption protocol. Let's discuss terms. A grin curled at the corners of my lips. I forwarded the email to Ethan with a simple note. Remember when you said, hobbies don't pay the bills? Because sometimes the best success story isn't just about proving everyone else wrong. It's about proving yourself right, one brilliant line of code at a time. And as for my family, they'd finally learned a lesson I'd been trying to teach for years. Some hobbies are worth taking seriously, especially when they end up owning your company. I've spent years being underestimated, talked over, and labeled as the quirky sister with a hobby, but today I'm living proof that what others call a hobby can become an empire, if you believe in yourself fiercely enough to keep going when nobody else sees your vision. If my story resonated with you, I'd love your support. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of my journey inspired you most, or share your own story of being dismissed or underestimated. I read every single one, and it reminds me why speaking up matters. And here's my advice, from one quiet fighter to another. Never let someone else's lack of imagination define your limits. Keep building, keep coding, keep dreaming, even if you're doing it alone in a tiny apartment. The breakthroughs come from the places people overlook. So subscribe and stay with me for the next chapter because my journey's far from over. Let's keep proving, to ourselves first and the world second, that the biggest revolutions often begin as just a hobby. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is quietly becoming the person they said you could never be.